Hey, what's up? I am Jay Moss, and today we are going to talk about FabFilter Pro Q3. I use this plugin constantly, and I use it in so many different ways. It's easily the most versatile EQ I've used. It's almost scary because you can type FAB with just one hand, so when I need to reach for it, which is like all the time, my muscle memory is like, bloop, and then it just pops up, and then I'm in. Anyway, I'm psyched to show you a bunch of different ways I use this. Can't recommend it enough, so let's check it out. I think you're going to love it. What's up? Here we go. We're going to look at FabFilter Pro Q3. We're going to look at it on rhythm guitars. We're going to look at it on lead guitars. We're going to look at it on some bass. We're even going to look at it on some vocals. And then on top of that, I really want to show you guys what I do, or at least what I did in this instance on the stereo bus as well. FabFilter almost always, at least one of my EQs of choice on stereo bus. And let's be honest, it's pretty much one of my EQs of choice everywhere. So here we go. Okay, so as you can see here, this is my guitar bus highlighted. Effectively, I think I have, let's look. Yep, I have all my guitars, including leads, going here. So everything guitar is getting this treatment. One of the reasons that I can get away with that is because, you know, we use the same cab, the same mic. So some of the sonic sort of irregularities or deficiencies or things that I wanted to see happen were sort of consistent across. And then when we get to leads, you'll see that I make further changes. But for now, everything guitar is going to go through this. And I can show you that by soloing and then playing. Okay, so we have a ton of cool stuff going on here. We'll start with the bass. So I thought the guitars were really articulate, but one thing I didn't love is I thought they could just use a little bit more depth, a little bit more power. So a lot of times you're gonna find that around 100 hertz to 200 hertz. And FabFilter is actually exceptionally elegant at being able to quickly figure out where you want to boost. So this little icon here, this little headphone icon, that is like the best. So when I click this, I'm only going to hear what's inside of the band that I've selected. And this makes it so quick and easy for me to figure out where I want to make this boost. You know, I immediately hear the guitars and I think, oh, they could probably use a little more low end. Now, where that low end is going to get boosted is going to vary based on every session, right? Or at least every session. So here we go. I'm going to show you how this headphone thing works right now. Pretty sick, right? The reason I used 200 here is because it did slope down into the low mid-range a little bit, and that also kind of warmed up the guitars too. And this cut really only exists because I wanted this slope to fall off a little steeper. For example, if I were to bypass that, you'll see that it would have the equal amount of sort of slope coming down on both sides. So this cut lets me augment my overall EQ line, and it's not actually cutting below 0 dB. It's just sort of quickening the descent down into the lower mid-range. Okay, next. So we have these three, and they all exist in the upper mid-range to upper mid-range. I typically find guitars can get kind of pokey, kind of irritating, anywhere from, I guess, starting around 1K, then up around 4K. Here I don't have anything 4K necessarily. It's not surprising at all to me that we have some 2.2K, some 2.6K. There can be harmonic spikes here. For me anyway, there's harmonic spikes here like all the time. So now I'm going to show you what each one of these sounds like, and I want you to listen for the frequency, and then I'm going to bypass it. Now, I did the same thing 2 more times for different mid-range peaks I didn't love. A really great thing about this plugin is that I can bypass all 3 at the same time. I can select all 3 and I can drag them all as a group. And then I can just hit undo here and bring them back. So this whole high mid-range helper can be bypassed in case you quickly wanted it AB, which I'll do right now. And do you see how that kind of takes the whistle out of it? All right, and then let's quickly talk about this low pass filter. This is really common to see me do on guitars. A lot of times there's going to be weird spikes based on your preamp or based on your microphone or whatever. All of this stuff is going to conflict with the cymbals. Not much of it has any information that's really needed. It doesn't have a lot of note value. It just gets kind of hissy. It'll build up as you get closer to mastering and end up being a problem, most likely if you're a master engineer or whoever else. So it's pretty safe anywhere from 10K, and then 7K is where I would probably not roll off much further. It depends on the slope of your roll off. If you were to go down here and go all the way, boom, 96, or all the way brick wall, right? This is going to create more aliasing. This is going to be way more aggressive and probably sound kind of weird. But if you're doing something, let's even say like, I think I was at 48, but you can even do 36 here. Just something that gradually rolls off these higher frequencies. It gets rid of the junk in a more natural way. Recommended, give it a shot. Oh, especially if you use digital guitars. This is like a total must because the digital domain is just way harsher in these upper frequencies. So you're going to find yourself really wanting to try a low pass filter and find that perfect point where they still sound bright enough, but you're getting rid of that unnecessary high end stuff that's just going to conflict. All right, next let's look at some lead guitars. Instead of doing something so like global for all the guitars, I want you to see how I would treat an individual guitar here. This is like a semi-clean, dirty-ish tone that they use for the intro. It's an awesome tone. It has one or two little problems. We're gonna go hunting for those. They live in the exact same range that we had problems with the overall guitars, but because this guitar is on its own and you don't have that chorusy smearing thing going on, to me they sound a little bit more prevalent. I'm gonna show you how easy it is to find this stuff with FabFilter Pro Q3 and how helpful it is to just quickly grab and give a little dip. It like totally changes everything. Okay, so as you can see, here's the guitar I was just talking about. I have it soloed. Now watch. I'm gonna hit play. We obviously have nothing going on the EQ yet. You're gonna hit play. You're gonna leave your mouse kind of in the bottom here. And what we're gonna see is we're gonna see FabFilter start to show us where the peaks are. And they'll even label them for us. And this is sort of unlike anything I've ever seen with any other EQ. We can literally reach up and just grab a peak and start to pull it down. This is a feature I adore and I use constantly. Okay, that might sound subtle, but watch. Once you hear that frequency and then I bypass, you should probably really hear how much of a difference that makes. Listen for the frequency specifically that I grabbed. Okay, now watch me bypass. And we can over-exemplify this if I was to do a notch here. For me, what I just did is tasteful, conservative, and appropriate, but let's notch these and really overemphasize what this is doing. Here you go. So here's the frequencies again. Got one at 4K, got one around 25. And those two combined kind of create this annoying whistle. So you can hear when I turned that into a notch, it got kind of phasey, it got a little too much, but with the bell, it's just right. Like we're just taking away the whistle enough, it'll make it easier on the ear. And there's a vocal over this part that we're about to listen to. This is going to, again, take away some conflicting frequency information, particularly since this is a center panned guitar and these are gonna be center panned vocals. You're gonna wanna create space here for that vocal to sit on top. All of the diction of the vocal lives right around here. Okay, so now we're going to dig into that vocal I was just telling you about. There's a couple things. We're not going to do a lot. I mean, we used a great microphone. I'm pretty sure we used a Neve 1073 mic pre into a Distressor by Empirical Labs, which is awesome. So that does a lot of the work for us. But even still, some of this gear was designed to record to tape. And tape typically had this dynamic, inherent ways. This is one of the things people love about tape, of sort of rounding the ends of the frequency spectrum. These things that can build up in the digital domain because we literally capture things like a total snapshot, like it's so clear. Sometimes the ear doesn't want that. Sometimes the ear actually prefers something sort of like rounded. So in this instance, what we're going to do is we're probably going to do a little shaving on either end. We're going to shave things that you probably wouldn't hear on your own, but once they're gone, it's just another one of those little things that adds up and just makes your record sound more pro. All right, so we're going to take a look at this vocal here. Again, I haven't done anything yet. I want you to look down here for sub-frequency sort of rumble stuff. It'll be pretty low lying, but it's there and it doesn't need to be there. And then there's going to be this crazy spike somewhere around 20K. Most people won't be able to hear it, but it will affect your plugins, it will affect your master, it will affect your gear. So it's important for us to see this, even if we can't hear it, and round that off too, because there's really no reason to leave this spike that you're about to see here. And if you didn't have a really good analyzer equalizer tied into your EQ, you might never know it's there. You know, part of the benefits of using digital plugins is that we get to have a couple advantages here. We actually get to see the frequencies in real time and make decisions both based with our ears, but also the visual information can be really helpful for us as well.
I've waited all my life to meet you. I've counted down the weeks.
Okay, as you can see, I rolled off a bunch of stuff around 20, 30, 40, 50. It doesn't really affect the vocal at all, but it's gonna eat headroom in our mix, right? And we wanna save this for our kick drum. We wanna save this for our bass guitar. There's no reason to leave that. And then again, I'm sure you saw this spike over here, and we're gonna go after that now.
I've waited all my life to meet you. I've counted down the weeks, the days, the hours. I won't let this world defeat you.
This might be an instance where I go steeper than I thought I would, because that spike is pretty big. Like, I really want to get rid of it.
I've waited all my life to.
Cool, I would say that's low enough. If you guys haven't figured it out yet, the dark gray in the background is what it used to be.
I've waited all my life to meet.
And then this line, this white line, is what you've turned it into.
I've waited all my life to meet you.
So for me, that sounds really good. I have one more subtle tweak, and you're gonna see me use this on the bass guitar and also the stereo bus in a second. This is one of my absolute favorite things about Pro Q3, is that I can have this react dynamically. So far, all we've done is we've corrected things, but we've corrected them statically, with the exception of the high mid-range in the rhythm guitar section, which did have a little bit of this dynamic process. Most of what we've done has just been normal, if you will, EQ moves. And this is sort of like EQ meets multiband compression. You won't find this in many, if any, other plugins. It is in a couple other plugins, but I personally think it is most elegantly done in Pro Q3 for sure. All we have to do is where I heard that little low mid-range, like high bass, low mid-range buildup, which I think could use just a subtle bit of like attenuation, but based on what note he's singing and how loud he's singing it, you're going to put your EQ point where you think the middle of what you want to tuck down is, and then you're just going to pull this outer ring. This is going to increase the range either down or expand the range upward. Obviously, there might be times where you would want the inverse, where at points you would want to add more bass, you'd want to add more low mid range. For me, in this moment, I'm going to subtract. I'm going to start here, and then we'll just hone it in.
I've waited all my life to meet you. I've counted down the weeks, the days, the hours. I won't.
That's great. That's going to control our low frequencies, which typically low frequencies require a little bit more compression. When low frequencies are overly dynamic in rock music, it can make a mess. So we're always looking to give those that subtle little nudge that keeps them in control. Okay, bass guitar is next. What we're gonna find here is this is a pretty distorted signal. It's very dynamically controlled. It's not gonna need a lot. What I'm gonna do to the bass is gonna be very similar to what we just did to the vocals, where I'm going to just contain some of those low frequencies, probably around 100 hertz, but we'll take a look. Really simple to do, it's so fast. And again, control your low end. It's very, very helpful in making sure that your mix sounds really dense and powerful. All right, here we go, bass guitar. Let's just hit play and we'll take a look at what this looks like, and we'll use our ears for a second, and then we'll make a couple decisions. Okay, cool. This is a really good example. So we have what I would like to call here sort of like the 3 to maybe 4, but more like 3 peaks of good sounding bass guitar. We have up here, we have our low end, right? This is like 80 to 100 hertz. Then we have our low mid range, which is sort of double peaking here, but this is okay. This is going to typically be not as high, particularly for rock music, as our low end, and not as high as our pick attack. But if you don't have a little bit of this, you'll lose a lot of the note value of your bass guitar inside of the mix. So to see these is encouraging. Up here, as always, we have a little bit of a bump around 2.2, 2.3K. To me, it sounds kind of aggressive and cool, and I like the way that it's poking out. If you didn't, as we saw before, you could just grab this and pop it down really quickly. I'm okay with this roll off. I don't mind some sub down here. However, what we did see over here is we had a bunch of this high end stuff. That's definitely got to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to high cut here and just sort of see where it makes sense to stop. Cool, that doesn't seem to be changing the signal much, and it's cleaning up all this sort of high end, you can barely hear it stuff that we just don't need. The big thing I'm hearing is that while the low end sounds cool, it is a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more overwhelming than the other pieces of this bass guitar. So we're gonna take a look, and I think I'm gonna do the same thing. Based on what I saw, I think it's around 100 hertz, and we're going to just gently, dynamically control the low end of the bass only just by using this ring right here. Awesome. I know that's a subtle dip. I know we didn't even hit 3 dB, but to me, that little bit of control goes a long way. I hope these examples are working for you. I absolutely understand that this is more nuanced stuff, but these are the types of controls that as you advance into your mixing career, you're gonna want this stuff to feel important. Those types of changes will likely end up meaning a lot to you because you'll have a better understanding of how all this stuff combines to make the whole. I mean, that's really part of the mastery, but it's cool to show you guys this stuff and see, like, you know, how it's done. Okay, and lastly, stereo bus. I love EQing my stereo bus. There are so many different thoughts out there. A lot of people say, like, don't touch it. If you have to touch your stereo bus, that means you should go back into your mix, that you should go back into your individual tracks, that you should go back into your group tracks, you should be fixing things there. And I completely understand why people would think that. It's not how I often mix. I'm more of like a macro mixer. You know, think of me in painting a room. I go in with the rollers. So for me, that's a stereo bus. I get all my roller work done, and then I go in and I actually back down and I'll start painting the trim, and then the finest little details, I'll do those last. So a lot of times when I get my phase right and when I get sort of things sounding good, but I haven't EQ'd anything yet, maybe just panned a couple things, got some rough levels, I'll build the general shape right on the stereo bus, and then from there, I'll backtrack to things that aren't working with those more like macro, sort of like big thinking settings. For that reason, I want to show you guys a couple cool things that I did here, a couple things we haven't covered yet, but again, these things are super easy to do with FabFilter, and that's why you'll find me leaning on this nonstop. All right, here we go. Stereo bus. This is exciting stuff. Yes, again, I understand our biggest cut is only 3 dB. However, little changes go a long way. I'm excited to talk about this one. All right, let's start in the low end and we'll just work our way up. So this is also like the bass guitar. This is gonna control the low end just a little bit more. It's about all of these tiny little movements, but do you see that little M there? That's what's gonna separate this from how we did on the bass guitar. Because when we were working on the bass guitar and it is just a mono signal, I don't have to separate out the mid content from the side content. So in this instance, I wanna control the kick drum a little bit and the bass guitar even more, and both of those things live in the center channel. Setting it up is really easy. You make your point like normal, and after you create your point, you just go over here, and you can literally pick, do I want to EQ the left side, the right side, the entire mix? By the way, this is where it's set by default. Just the center of the mix, or just the sides of the mix? And since most of our low-end content is going to be mono material anyway, I go right for mid in this instance. Let's have a listen to that. That's awesome. That's totally helping glue together our kick drum and our bass guitar. That's getting our low end sounding tight and together. I thought the mix could be warmer. This is a really simple move. It's not even a whole dB, and this is a very like graduated curve, and this is just a little mid-range boost. I'll let you hear where I decided to boost. I think engineers who might be earlier on in their careers or just starting out, like to scoop things because that's how you EQ in your car. But so much of the note value and so much of the power of a mix lives in the low mid range. And it's a tricky part of the frequency spectrum because if you overboost this, things get boxy and ugly quick. I want to overdo it right now. So that's obviously terrible, but here's what it sounds like if we scooped it. Sounds thin and weak, so you'll have to play around, but just a little boost here went a long way for me. And then this EQ point really exists just to sort of slightly elongate this back end curve so it slides down into the higher frequencies a little bit slower. Probably if it wasn't there, you might not notice. At the time that I EQ'd this, it must have been important to me, but either way, this is something that you can easily do. Look, if we raise this up, you can lengthen the decay. And then if we bring it down, we can cross digital zero even faster. Okay, and lastly, let's talk about these two right here. It probably looks really weird to have two mid-range cuts in the same place. The difference is this mid-range cut is full frequency. As you can see down here, it's affecting the entire stereo field. This mid-range cut is going to be focused on just the sides. What I like about this is that our vocal diction is going to live here. And what is in the high mid-range in most rock mixes on the sides? Harshness of guitars and harshness of cymbals. So if I solo this, we're not going to hear much snare. We're not going to hear any kick drum probably. We're probably just going to hear a whole lot of whistle. So I probably made this move as I was getting close to the end. I probably built the mix and made it sound great. And I thought, wow, this is so close, but all I want is just a little bit more vocal diction. So I was like, well, let me just scoop out on the sides the stuff that might be clouding up the mix and getting in the way of the vocal, which is in the center, taking center stage. Now check this out. If I solo this mid-range boost, which is effectively in the exact same spot as the other one, or very close to the same spot, you're going to hear the whole mix. You're going to hear the snare. This is not something easily done with other plugins. This is a really, really cool and easy trick that you can do with FabFilter. And again, it's one of the many reasons I just keep coming back. So that about does it for now. I hope you guys like the plugin. It's definitely on my list of total must-haves. For me personally, this one was a game changer. Every now and then as engineers, we encounter something that makes our workflow so much faster and so much easier that it's just worth it. If you can, demo it, try it. I think you'll love it. Good luck and happy mixing.
I swear to let you grow like a wildflower.